What do the phrases "the salt of the earth," "a law unto themselves," and "the blind leading the blind" all have in common? They all come from one book. A book that has sold billions of copies, been translated into hundreds of languages, and has so profoundly shaped the English-speaking world that its echoes are in our laws, our literature, and our everyday conversations. The King James Version of the Bible. For many of us, it feels like it's always been here, a monolithic pillar of faith and literature. But the story of how we got this book is a dramatic tale of political intrigue, scholarly debate, and a power play by a king that changed the world forever. So today, we're answering two huge questions. First, how did a collection of ancient scrolls and letters become the Bible in the first place? Who decided which books got in and which were left out? And second, how did this specific translation, the King James Version, emerge from the chaos of 17th century England to become a literary masterpiece? Let's start at the beginning. Before you can have a translation, you need a library of books to translate. The process of choosing those books is called canonization, from the Greek word canon, meaning a measuring stick, or a rule. And this wasn't a single event, but a process that took over 1,000 years. For the Old Testament, it began with oral traditions, stories, and laws passed down for generations. Over centuries, these were written down and collected. By the 1st century, the Hebrew Bible was organized into 3 main sections: the Law, also known as the Torah, the Prophets, or Nevi'im, and the Writings, or Ketuvim. But there was a twist. Many Jews lived outside of Israel and spoke Greek. So, starting in the 3rd century BCE, a Greek translation was made called the Septuagint. This Greek version included several books written in the centuries after the main Hebrew scriptures were finished. These extra books are known today as the Apocrypha, or the Deuterocanon. This is important, so remember it for later. The New Testament canon formed much faster. After Jesus, his apostles and their followers wrote gospels and letters to guide the new Christian communities. As these writings were copied and circulated, the early church began to recognize which ones were the most reliable and authentic. They used 3 main measuring sticks to decide. First was apostolic origin. Was it written by an apostle like Paul or John, or a close associate like Mark or Luke? Second was orthodoxy. Did its teachings align with the core beliefs about Jesus that were accepted across all the churches? And third was Catholicity. Was the book universally used and accepted by the wider church, not just one small, isolated group? Now, let's bust a huge myth. You've probably heard that the Bible was created by the Roman Emperor Constantine at the Council of Nicaea in 325 AD. This idea is popular in books and movies, but it's completely false. The historical records from that council show they never even discussed which books should be in the Bible. The truth is, the canon wasn't forced from the top down. It grew from the bottom up. By the end of the 2nd century, long before Constantine, the core of our New Testament was already widely recognized. Later, church councils, like those at Hippo and Carthage, simply affirmed the consensus that had already been established by believers for centuries. So what about the books that were rejected, like the Gnostic Gospels? Well, they were left out for failing those 3 tests. They were written much later, often in the 2nd and 3rd centuries. They contained theology that contradicted the apostolic teachings, and they were never widely accepted by the early church as a whole. Okay, let's fast forward 1,200 years to the year 1603. James VI of Scotland becomes King James I of England, and he inherits a kingdom torn by religious conflict. The official Church of England was in a constant tug-of-war with the Puritans, who wanted to purify the Church of anything that felt too Catholic. This conflict was perfectly captured in their Bibles. On one side, you had the Bishop's Bible. It was the officially authorized version, but it was clunky, academic, and honestly, nobody really liked it. On the other side, you had the Geneva Bible. This was the People's Bible. It was portable, affordable, and had helpful notes in the margins explaining the text. But King James hated the Geneva Bible. Why? Because some of those helpful notes questioned the divine right of kings, which was the very foundation of James's power. To him, the Geneva Bible was politically subversive. So, in 1604, James called the Hampton Court Conference to try and settle these religious disputes. He shot down nearly every Puritan demand, famously declaring, "No bishop, no king." The conference seemed like a total failure for the Puritans. But then, the Puritan leader Dr. John Reynolds made one last, desperate suggestion. What if they created a new, better translation of the Bible for everyone? A light bulb went off for King James. This was a stroke of political genius. He could reject all the other Puritan demands, but grant them this one project. A new, single, authorized version would unify his kingdom, replace the unpopular Bishop's Bible, and, most importantly, get rid of that seditious Geneva Bible and its pesky, anti-king notes. The project was massive. About 47 of the finest scholars in England were assembled into 6 committees. They were given a strict set of rules to follow. Rule number 1. Use the Bishop's Bible as the base text. Rule number 3. Keep traditional church words like church instead of the Puritan preferred congregation. And the most important one? Rule number 6. No marginal notes at all. James was making sure his Bible would have no commentary challenging his authority. The process was incredibly rigorous. Every single verse was checked and rechecked at least 14 times to ensure it was accurate, dignified, and free of any one person's theological bias. After 7 years of intense labor, in 1611, the work was published. So, what about those extra Old Testament books from the Septuaginta Apocrypha? The King James Version translators came up with a classic compromise. They included the Apocrypha, but placed it in a separate section between the Old and New Testaments. This reflected the official Anglican position. These books were useful for historical reading and moral instruction, but not for establishing core doctrine. For over 270 years, the KJV was always printed with the Apocrypha. It was only in the 1800s that Bible societies, wanting to print cheaper Bibles for the masses, started leaving it out to save money. The King James Version wasn't an overnight success. The Geneva Bible remained incredibly popular for decades. But the KJV's ultimate triumph wasn't just due to the king's authority. It was because of its language. The translators, working in the age of Shakespeare, crafted a text of unparalleled beauty. Its majestic rhythm and powerful prose were so magnificent that they didn't just translate the Bible. They helped shape the English language itself. So, the book that sits on so many shelves is the product of 2 incredible stories. The story of a library, assembled over a millennium through the consensus of faith communities, and the story of a translation, born from a king's brilliant political maneuver that accidentally created one of the greatest literary works in history. It's a testament to how history, politics, and faith can collide to create something truly monumental. Thanks for watching. If you learned something new, hit that like button and subscribe for more deep dives into history. And let me know in the comments, what is your favorite phrase that comes from the King James Bible. See you next time.